All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to open up the playbook for planet Earth. We're going to look at the fundamental rules that govern all life, take a hard look at our own impact on the game, and then figure out how we can start playing for a much more sustainable future. Let's get started. So, if you could get your hands on an instruction manual for Earth, what do you think it would say? Well, here's the thing. We kinda already have one. It's called Ecology. It's the science that explains this incredibly complex web of connections that makes all life on our planet even possible. So let's start with part one, our planet's instruction manual. To really get a handle on the whole system, we first need to see how it's all put together, from the tiniest living thing all the way up to the entire living world. You see, ecology is built in layers, kind of like a giant wedding cake. It all starts with a single organism. Let's say a single deer. A bunch of those deer living together, that's a population. Now add in all the other populations, the trees, the birds, the squirrels, even the fungi in the soil, and you've got yourself a community. Mix in the non-living stuff like the water and the rocks, and boom, you have an ecosystem. When you zoom way out, you get these huge regions called biomes, like a whole forest. And finally, put all of that together, and you get the biosphere, the sum total of all life on Earth. Okay, so we've got all the players on the field, but how do they actually interact with each other? Well, it pretty much all comes down to one thing: energy. The flow of energy is what connects every single living thing in this massive tangled web. The simplest way to see this energy flow is what we call a food chain, a straight line of who eats who. It's pretty straightforward. Energy from the sun gets soaked up by a producer, like grass. Then a primary consumer, say a rabbit, comes along and eats the grass. After that, a secondary consumer, like a fox, eats the rabbit. See? The energy just moves right on up the chain. Ecologists have a specific name for these steps: trophic levels. Level 1 is for the producers, plants basically, who make their own food. Level 2 is for the primary consumers, the herbivores who munch on those plants. They, in turn, get eaten by the secondary consumers at level 3, and those guys might get eaten by the tertiary consumers at the very top. Each level is getting its energy from the one right below it. Now, this brings us to what is arguably the most important rule in nature's entire playbook, the 10% rule. Get this, only about 10% of the energy from one level actually makes it to the next level up. The other 90%, it gets used by the organism just to live its life, or it's lost as heat. This one simple rule explains so much, like why there are always way more plants than herbivores and way more herbivores than predators. There's just not enough energy to go around to support massive populations at the top of the food chain. So that 10% rule shows us really clearly that nature has limits. It has rules. But what happens when one species, that's us, starts to bend those rules? Or maybe just ignore them altogether? Let's take a look at the impact of human activity on these really finely tuned systems. Every single ecosystem has something called a carrying capacity. Think of it as a natural speed limit. It's the maximum number of individuals of any given species that the environment can support over the long haul with the resources it has. If a population overshoots that limit, the system just can't keep up, and eventually that population will crash. So, how do we measure our own pressure on the planet's carrying capacity? We use a tool called the ecological footprint. It's a really clever way of calculating how much of the planet's resources are actually needed to support your lifestyle. You know, the land to grow your food, the materials to make your stuff, and the forests needed to soak up all your carbon emissions. And this whole idea is shown so powerfully by something called Earth Overshoot Day. It marks the exact date each year when humanity has used up all the resources that the planet can regenerate in that entire year. And as you can see, for the last few years, that day has been hitting sometime in late July or early August. What does that mean? It means for almost half the year, we're living on ecological credit. We're using up resources that were meant for the future. Okay, so yeah, that's the challenge, and it's a big one. But the playbook doesn't just list the problems. It also has solutions. And that brings us to part 4, a blueprint for balance, which is all centered around this one powerful idea: sustainability. This right here is the classic definition of sustainability, and it's so important to get this right. It's not about stopping progress, no way. It's about completely redefining it so that the way we live our lives today doesn't make it impossible for future generations to live theirs. It's really all about fairness across time. So how do we actually pull this off? Well, a really key framework is something called the triple bottom line, or, as you'll often hear it, the 3 Ps. It argues that true sustainability isn't just about the planet. It's about finding that sweet spot where environmental health, social equity for people, and economic viability, or profit, all overlap. You just can't sacrifice one for the others and still call it sustainable. It doesn't work. Now, to put that big idea into practice all around the world, we created this blueprint, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Think of the 3 Ps as the what and the SDGs as the how. They are this interconnected set of targets that cover everything you can imagine, from ending poverty and achieving gender equality to clean energy and protecting our oceans. It's basically the world's shared to-do list for a sustainable future by 2030. This brings us to the final part of the Playbook. How do we actually put these incredible ideas into action? Well, it's going to require a fundamental redesign of our systems, and that's especially true for our economy. For the last couple of 100 years, we've basically been running on a linear model. We take resources from the earth, we make products, and then we just dispose of them. It's take, make, dispose, and it is incredibly wasteful. The new Playbook calls for something totally different, a circular economy. It's a system that's actually inspired by nature itself, where there is no such thing as waste. Materials are designed from the start to be kept in use for as long as humanly possible. The core of this circular model is actually pretty simple: reduce, reuse, recycle. First, and most importantly, we reduce how much stuff we're consuming in the first place. Then, we reuse products as many times as we can. And finally, we recycle the materials back into the system, not into a landfill. In a true circular economy, today's waste is just tomorrow's raw material. So, from the intricate layers of life to that simple, powerful flow of energy, we've seen the rules, we've measured our impact, and we've explored a blueprint for a much, much better way forward. The planet's playbook? It's always been open for us to read. The only question that's left is whether we're finally ready to start playing by the rules.